The sun blazed fiercely over the African savanna, painting the vast landscape in shades of gold and amber. The wind, dry and hot, stirred the long grasses, which swayed like an ocean of green waves beneath the cloudless sky. The sounds of the wild were ever present, distant calls of birds soaring high above, the rustle of leaves stirred by small creatures darting through the underbrush, and the steady hum of the earth itself, alive with the pulse of nature. But amidst this endless beauty, the savanna was a place of survival, where the balance between predator and prey was delicate, and every creature knew the weight of the unspoken laws of the land. At the edge of a dusty watering hole, a lone lion prowled with purpose. His golden mane, once thick and commanding, had thinned with age, now hanging in wispy strands across his weathered face. His once powerful muscles, which had driven him through countless hunts, had softened with time. He had been cast out of his pride many seasons ago, his strength diminishing with each passing year. Now he roamed alone, a shadow of the lion he once was, seeking food to fill the growing hunger gnawing at his bones. The lion had never feared age, for he had once been the king of the savanna, his roar echoing across the plains, a sound that could silence the winds. But now the weight of time pressed down on him. His joints ached, his once vibrant coat was streaked with dirt and scars, and his sharp eyes, though still alert, had dulled. His pride had been a thing of the past, replaced by solitude. He had learned to hunt alone, but hunting had become a battle with his own fading vitality. The kill had become more elusive, and each hunt left him weaker, his energy drained. Today, however, he had no choice. His stomach growled with a hunger that was becoming unbearable, a hunger he could no longer ignore. He needed to eat. The gazelles, swift and agile, were his favored prey. They were everywhere, their lithe forms darting through the grasslands, their elegant leaps over the earth making them difficult targets but thrilling hunts. He spotted one now, grazing near the water's edge, her delicate frame almost blending into the golden grass, her head bent low as she drank from the still water. She was a young gazelle, her fur a soft, tawny brown, and her eyes were wide with the vigilance of one who had known the dangers of the wild all too well. Her fawn was not far behind her, staying close, moving with the cautious, innocent grace of youth. She was alone today, separated from the safety of her herd. There was a quiet desperation in her movements, a careful calculation in the way she stepped. The savanna was harsh, and she had learned early the importance of being ever alert. Without the protection of her mother or the safety of the herd, she was vulnerable, and she knew it. The lion crouched low, his powerful muscles tensing as he prepared for the final rush. His eyes fixed on the gazelle, tracking her every movement, calculating the perfect moment to strike. The thrill of the hunt surged through him, but this time, something unexpected stopped him. He watched her as she lifted her head from the water, the delicate arc of her neck drawing his gaze. There was an energy about her, an agility, and an awareness that fascinated him. She was not like the others he had hunted. She was different, full of life and alertness, a creature finely tuned to the rhythms of the savanna. For a moment, the lion forgot his hunger. His instincts urged him forward, to chase, to hunt, but something deeper within him paused. Instead of rushing forward, he remained still, watching from the tall grasses. The gazelle did not seem to sense the danger, her focus on the world around her, her fawn close by. He marveled at her, not with hunger, but with a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. The chase no longer seemed as important as the quiet beauty of the gazelle, her grace, and the way she moved as though the land itself belonged to her. The lion's gaze softened as he watched her, the predator within him fading, replaced by something far more unusual, respect, perhaps even admiration. Today he would not hunt. Today he would simply watch. The first time in years he had chosen not to give in to the urge to kill. And so, the lion remained there, hidden in the tall grasses, observing the gazelle as she moved with her fawn, unaware of the unlikely observer who had for once chosen not to strike. The lion crouched lower, his golden eyes locked onto the gazelle's slender frame. His muscles were taut with the urge to spring forward, to close the gap between them in a few powerful strides. Hunger gnawed at him. He could feel it in every part of his body, a hollow ache that had become all too familiar. His mouth watered as he imagined the feel of his claws sinking into the gazelle's soft flesh. She was vulnerable, alone, separated from the herd. She was his prey. But as the gazelle lifted her head from the water, her wide eyes scanning the horizon, something within the lion stilled him. He could sense her awareness, her unease, as though she too knew the delicate balance between life and death. For a fleeting moment, the lion saw her not as prey, but as a creature worthy of his respect, alive, aware, graceful. His instincts, honed by years of survival, urged him to pounce, to hunt, but he could not move. The tension in his muscles remained, but his body refused to act. The gazelle took a few cautious steps away from the watering hole, her gaze still searching the grasslands. A strange, unsettling feeling crept through the lion's chest. Was this truly hunger or something else? It was not the thrill of the chase that kept him in place. It was a quiet sense of connection, a feeling he couldn't name. Something about her, her vulnerability, her alertness, stirred a forgotten emotion in him. But before the lion could fully understand his hesitation, the gazelle sensed it too. Her sharp ears twitched, and her body tensed as if some primal instinct screamed at her to flee. She turned, her hooves striking the earth as she bounded away, her body swift and graceful. Her fawn, who had been grazing nearby, followed closely behind. The lion watched, his mind caught between the hunt and a strange sense of reluctance. She was already too far. He had lost his chance. Just as the gazelle's powerful legs carried her further into the open plains, a new danger emerged. A low, swift rustle in the tall grass. The lion's eyes narrowed, instinct once again sharpening his senses. From the underbrush, a cheetah emerged, its sleek body low to the ground, eyes fixed on the gazelle. The cheetah had no hesitation. It was a predator of the same caliber as the lion. But unlike the lion, the cheetah's speed was its strength. It saw the gazelle as an easy meal. The lion's instincts flared into action, and before he could even think, he was moving. The cheetah was fast, but the lion was larger, more powerful. He lunged, his muscles working in unison as he closed the distance between himself and the pursuing cheetah. The cheetah glanced over its shoulder, startled by the unexpected appearance of the lion. And for a split second, uncertainty flashed across its eyes. That was all the lion needed. With a deep, rumbling growl, he charged forward, closing the gap with terrifying speed. The cheetah, recognizing the threat of the lion, let out a hiss and darted away, disappearing into the grasses, leaving the gazelle unscathed. The lion stopped, his chest heaving with exertion, his gaze fixed on the retreating cheetah. He felt an odd sense of satisfaction. But it was more than just the thrill of victory. There was something else, something that stirred deeper within him, something protective. The gazelle, having witnessed the lion's unexpected intervention, stopped in her tracks. Her body was still, tense, her eyes wide with both fear and confusion. She had expected the lion to hunt her, to attack, but instead he had driven away the cheetah. She did not understand. The lion had protected her, but why? She had always known the lion as a predator, a force of nature that represented death. Could it be that she had misjudged him? The lion, for his part, felt a strange shift inside himself. His hunger was still there, gnawing at him, but now something else lingered, a need to ensure the gazelle's safety. He had not acted out of hunger or instinct, but something else, something foreign, protectiveness. He watched her, his amber eyes softer than they had been in years. The gazelle, still unsure, turned to face the lion but kept her distance. She lowered her head slightly, ears flicking nervously, the fear of her natural instincts rising to the surface. Should she run or should she stay? The lion, the very predator she had learned to fear, had saved her. But could she trust him? The lion's heart pounded, his chest tight. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. He had saved her, yes, but that didn't change what he was. A predator. Could he protect her, or would his instincts return, and would he chase her when hunger overtook him? The tension in the air was thick, a quiet battle of wills. The lion's instincts screamed at him to close the distance, to chase, to feast. But the unfamiliar feeling of protectiveness, of connection, held him back. Should he continue the hunt, or had something within him shifted? The lion was at war with himself, caught between his primal instincts and the unexpected bond that was forming between them. The gazelle, too, faced an inner conflict. Should she flee as her instincts told her to, or should she stay and face the lion, the creature who had saved her? For a moment, the savannah seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilling, the animals quiet. The lion and the gazelle stood on the precipice of something neither of them fully understood. And yet, the bond that had been forged in that brief moment of danger would not be easily forgotten. The lion's eyes softened as he watched the gazelle, his body still tense, but now with a strange yearning. Perhaps, for once, the chase was not the answer. Days passed, and the lion found himself observing the gazelle from a distance. It was no longer the thrill of the hunt that captivated him. His movements had become slower, more measured, as if the very act of watching her had taken over the instinct to chase. The gazelle, always alert, never once noticed his presence. She moved through the savannah with grace, her elegant leaps over the grasses taking her farther from the waterhole, into the deep heart of the plains. What began as curiosity soon evolved into something more. The lion found himself following her, quietly, almost unseen in the tall grass. He kept a careful distance, ensuring that she was aware of his presence without ever crossing the line between predator and protector. There was no longer any hunger in his gaze. Instead, it was fascination. Fascination with how she navigated the world, how she thrived in the very place that could take her life in an instant. He watched her from the shadows, a silent observer, and his heart felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in many years, a deep, unexpected attachment. The gazelle, for her part, began to sense the lion's presence. She would often glance over her shoulder, ears flicking nervously, as if she could feel his watchful eyes on her. Her instincts screamed for her to flee, but something inside her held her back. Each time she felt a new tension in the air, she'd notice the lion standing in the distance, ever watchful but never threatening. At first, the feeling of his presence unsettled her, but over time, she began to notice that when danger loomed, he was there to stop it, never with claws, but with a fierce, protective strength. One afternoon, as the gazelle grazed near a rocky outcrop, her fawn nibbling nearby, a shadow fell across the land. The air became heavy, charged with the scent of another predator, this time a hyena. The hyena crept from behind a cluster of thorn bushes, its eyes locked on the gazelle's fawn, its movements slow and deliberate. The lion watched from a distance, knowing that the hyena's sharp teeth and pack instincts were far too dangerous for the lone gazelle. Without a moment's hesitation, the lion moved. His massive frame appeared from the tall grass, muscles rippling beneath his fur as he roared a thunderous challenge. The hyena, startled by the lion's sudden appearance, froze for a moment. The gazelle's fawn, sensing the danger, bounded away in a panic, but the lion's attention never wavered. His growls were deep, filled with warning, and the hyena, seeing the lion's strength and the resolve in his eyes, turned tail and fled into the underbrush. The gazelle, witnessing this display, stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The lion had done it again, protected her from a predator that could have easily taken her young one. She could scarcely understand it, this unexpected alliance that seemed to defy nature's order. The lion, a creature of immense strength, a hunter at heart, had become her protector, and yet he had never once tried to harm her. The bond, though fragile, was beginning to form, and with it, a new kind of trust. She took a few tentative steps toward the lion, her gaze cautious, but this time she didn't retreat. There was a hesitation in her eyes, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The lion, too, stood still, watching her with that same quiet intensity. Their bond was strange, an anomaly in the vast expanse of the savannah, where predator and prey were never meant to meet as equals. But something in the gazelle's chest told her that, for now, there was no danger in the lion's presence. As the days turned into weeks, their strange companionship deepened. The gazelle began grazing in areas she would have once avoided, places where the lion's presence seemed to offer a sense of security. She noticed that she no longer needed to remain on edge, constantly scanning for threats. When she ventured too close to the edge of the predator's realm, the lion was there, watching over her, never intervening unless it was necessary, but always close by. In return, the lion found solace in her company. The savannah, vast and lonely as it was, no longer felt as empty with her near. Her presence, so delicate and full of life, brought something out of him that he had forgotten: peace. He had spent so many years surviving alone, fighting for every meal, struggling against the wear of his age. But in the gazelle's quiet company, there was an unspoken understanding. He did not need to be the king of the savannah anymore. With her, he did not have to fight for dominance or fear his fading strength. Instead, he could simply exist beside her, a protector in his own strange way. One day, the bond between them would be tested again. As the sun set over the savannah, the lion and gazelle wandered near a small riverbed. The lion's keen senses picked up a scent, familiar but dangerous. A crocodile had emerged from the murky waters, its cold eyes glinting in the fading light. It watched the gazelle closely, drawn to her vulnerability. Without hesitation, the lion sprang into action, rushing between the crocodile and the gazelle. The crocodile, sensing the lion's presence, lunged forward with frightening speed, its jaws snapping shut in a hungry arc. But the lion was faster. With a powerful swipe, he knocked the crocodile back into the river, his claws raking through the air. The gazelle, standing frozen, watched as the lion fought with strength and grace. The lion growled fiercely, his powerful jaws closing around the crocodile's tail, ensuring it would not pose a threat to her again. The gazelle's heart raced as she saw the lion battle the creature without a moment's hesitation. She knew she could never face such danger alone, yet the lion had defended her, just as he had before. Once again, he had proven his loyalty, his protectiveness, despite his nature as a predator. As the days continued to pass, the lion and the gazelle became something more than predator and prey. The lion, who had once been consumed by hunger and the fight for survival, had found in the gazelle not just a companion, but a reason to resist the primal urges that had defined his existence for so long. The gazelle, too, had begun to understand that not all predators were enemies. Sometimes the wild had its own rules, its own strange balance. In the lion's presence, she had found not only protection, but something she had never imagined possible: trust. Together they roamed the savannah, an unlikely pair bound by a shared understanding, a bond forged in the most unexpected of circumstances. And as the seasons turned, the lion and the gazelle continued their journey, learning from one another, surviving together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. As the days turned to weeks, the bond between the lion and the gazelle grew deeper, and yet the world around them was changing. The savannah, vast and unyielding, was a land ruled by the law of survival. Every creature, predator or prey, had its role, its place within the web of life. The lion had known this law all too well, and he had once been the embodiment of it, fierce, unstoppable, and king of his domain. But now something within him was shifting. Other predators had begun to take notice of the lion's strange behavior. They had watched from the shadows as the lion moved alongside the gazelle, guarding her, protecting her. To them, this was an unnatural thing. The lion was a predator, and the gazelle, by all accounts, was his prey. It was a simple and unspoken rule of nature that both were bound to honor. But here, in the heart of the savannah, this law had been broken. The lion was no longer hunting his prey. Instead, he was guarding it. A jackal, lean and cunning, was one of the first to take notice. He had seen the lion's strange actions from afar and had begun to question what was happening. One day, while the lion rested beneath a tree, the jackal crept closer, his eyes glinting with mischief and curiosity. "Is this the great lion?" the jackal called out mockingly, his voice carrying across the savannah. "The mighty hunter who has become a guardian of the weak?" The lion's golden eyes flashed open, and for a moment he looked at the jackal with disdain. He had no interest in the small scavenger's taunts, but the words cut deeper than he cared to admit. The jackal's voice echoed in his mind, questioning his strength, his purpose. The lion had always been the embodiment of power, but now he found himself standing between predator and prey in a role he had never imagined. Are you too old to hunt, old lion? The jackal continued, circling around the lion's resting form. Is it that you've grown weak, afraid to do what you were born to do? Hunt. Kill. The lion's chest tightened with frustration, a low growl escaping his throat. He was no longer the king he once was, but to hear the jackal mock him, to question his very nature, it stung. Silence, the lion muttered, his voice rough with the weight of his growing confusion. But the jackal persisted. You're nothing but a shadow of your former self, letting your food walk free while you watch. You're becoming like the others, weak. The words hit harder than the lion cared to admit. His instincts, honed by years of hunting and survival, began to clash with something new, a feeling he had never experienced before. He had always relied on his strength, his speed, his ability to dominate. But now it seemed as if those instincts were being eroded by something else, something that made him question his very nature. He had protected the gazelle without hesitation, without hunger, and now he was questioning whether he had become weak. Was he truly protecting her, or had he become a prisoner to an attachment that defied nature's rules? As the days wore on, the lion's inner turmoil deepened. He would watch the gazelle graze, her slender form darting through the grass with the grace of a creature untouched by fear. Every time a predator appeared, he was there to defend her. He had stood between her and the hyena, the crocodile, and even the wild dogs that prowled the edge of the savannah. But with each passing encounter, the line between predator and protector blurred, and the lion found himself torn between two worlds. His hunger still gnawed at him, a reminder of his once mighty strength, but it was no longer for the gazelle. His primal instincts, the ones that had once guided him with certainty, were at war with the new emotions that had risen within him. The lion was no longer sure if his actions were driven by duty or by something deeper, a growing bond that neither he nor the gazelle could fully understand. The gazelle, too, began to feel the weight of this uncertainty. She had seen the lion's strength, had felt his protection time and again, but now she found herself questioning it. She had always known the lion as a predator, a creature that could end her life with a single swipe of his paw. But the lion had changed. He had stood between her and death, kept her safe when he had every reason to devour her. Still, there was a lingering fear in her heart. Was this protection real, or was it some twisted illusion? She had heard the warnings from the other gazelles, her kind's natural enemies. Never trust a lion, they had said. He is a hunter, and his nature is to kill. She would often glance back at him as they moved through the savannah, her heart racing with the instinctual urge to flee. She knew the lion's true nature. She had seen the bloodlust in his eyes before, even if it was now hidden beneath a strange calm. Was she truly safe with him, or was she merely a pawn in some strange game of survival? The lion sensed her hesitation. He could see it in the way she moved, the way she watched him with a wary eye, always ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Her distrust stung, but he could not fault her. She had every reason to fear him. He was a predator, and no matter how much he had changed, he would always be a threat to her. But despite this, something in the lion's chest tightened whenever she moved away from him. The thought of her running from him, of being lost to the dangers of the savannah, filled him with a sense of dread he couldn't shake. One fateful evening, as the sun sank low on the horizon, their bond would be tested. A pack of wild dogs, hungry and relentless, had appeared in the distance. The lion spotted them first, his keen senses picking up the scent of their presence. He growled low, his body instinctively tensing, but he did not retreat. The gazelle, seeing the pack, froze in place, her body trembling. The wild dogs moved swiftly, surrounding her, closing in from every side. The lion stood between her and the pack, his massive frame blocking their path. The dogs circled, their eyes gleaming with hunger, their growls low and menacing. The lion's body was taut, ready for a fight, but he could feel the weight of age in his limbs. He could no longer fight as he once had, but he would not let the gazelle fall to these predators. The pack lunged, their teeth bared, but the lion was faster. With a roar, he charged, swiping at the nearest dog with his massive paw, sending it flying into the air. The others scattered, but they circled back, snarling. determined to take down the lion who had become an obstacle. The gazelle, her heart racing, knew she could not stand idly by. She had seen the lion's strength, but now it was her turn to act. She darted between the trees, her small frame slipping through the gaps in the thick branches, drawing the attention of the wild dogs. The dogs hesitated, distracted by her swift movements. She was fast, nimble, exactly what the wild dogs had been counting on. Together, the lion and the gazelle fought for survival. The lion, with his powerful claws and sheer force, kept the dogs at bay. The gazelle, with her speed and agility, led them away from the lion, drawing them into the trees where the lion's size would be a disadvantage. In the end, the wild dogs, realizing they had no chance of defeating the lion, retreated into the shadows, leaving the lion and the gazelle victorious. As the dust settled and the danger passed, the lion stood tall, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his gaze fixed on the gazelle. She had trusted him. She had fought by his side. And for the first time in many seasons, the lion felt a true sense of peace. He had not only protected her, he had learned something about himself in the process. The primal urge to hunt, to kill, had not won. Instead, it was the bond they had forged that had allowed them both to survive. And perhaps for the first time in his life, the lion had found something even more powerful than the instincts of a predator, a partnership, a true companion in the wild. The lion's strength was beginning to fade. His once mighty frame, forged by years of hunting and defending his territory, had begun to show signs of age and wear. His muscles were stiff and his steps were slower than before. The wounds from past battles, some earned in the defense of his pride, others from solitary skirmishes with rival predators, had left their mark. He could feel the weight of his injuries deep in his bones. Every movement was an effort. The simple act of standing was beginning to feel like a struggle. The lion had always been a force of nature, powerful and relentless, but now he could no longer keep up with the pace of the savannah. His mind still burned with the instincts of a predator, but his body could no longer support them. He knew he could not protect the gazelle forever. She was swift and agile, but she was also vulnerable. The savannah was a place of danger, and while the lion had been her guardian, his days of protecting her might soon be over. The sun had begun to set one evening, casting long shadows across the land, when the lion found himself lying beneath a large acacia tree, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. The gazelle grazed nearby, her fawn nestled close to her. She had learned to trust him, to rely on him, but the lion could not shake the growing fear that he was failing her. He had already become weaker, and soon he would no longer be able to chase off the predators that circled their world. His mind wandered to the harsh realities of nature. The lion had been born to hunt, to fight, to rule. But now, as his body ached with the weight of time, he questioned his place in the world. He could feel the instinct to run, to save himself, to let the gazelle go and preserve his own life. It was a thought that gnawed at him, the cold realization that he might have to abandon her in order to survive. As the lion lay there, the gazelle approached him, her gentle steps barely making a sound in the thick grass. She nuzzled his side, her warm breath against his fur. For a moment, the lion closed his eyes, savoring the connection they had forged. But the harsh truth lingered in his mind. He was no longer the lion he once was. He could not protect her forever. The gazelle, sensing his weariness, nuzzled him again, her trust unwavering. She had seen the lion fight for her, protect her, and she had come to understand something that went against her every instinct. He was her protector, not her predator. Even though he was a creature of the wild, a symbol of strength and dominance, he had shown her compassion and care that no other had. She could not abandon him, not now, not after everything they had shared. Over the following days, the lion and the gazelle moved more slowly through the savannah. The lion's pace had slowed further, and he struggled to keep up. The gazelle, though small and delicate, stayed by his side, helping him find water and food. She would lead him to the riverside, where he could drink, and together they would graze on the lush grasses near the water. The gazelle's loyalty to the lion had become evident. She had come to understand that his presence was not a threat, but a protection. Yet the lion could see the worry in her eyes. She had grown to care for him, just as he had for her. She was no longer the frightened prey he had once seen her as. She had become his companion, and they had become something more. An unlikely pair bound by the shared struggle for survival in a world that had little mercy for the weak. But the lion's fear never fully left him. The savannah was a place where survival depended on strength, and he knew he was no longer strong enough to fend off all the dangers it held. His fears were confirmed one afternoon when a new threat appeared. A rival lion, a younger male, had wandered into the territory. The lion could see the strength in his movements, the power in his shoulders, the fierce gleam in his eyes. The new lion was a challenge, one that the old lion knew he could not face alone. His body was too weak, his wounds too many. The lion had spent too many years defending his territory, and now his own strength had betrayed him. The younger lion moved closer, his gaze fixed on the lion and the gazelle. It was clear he was a predator, and he saw the lion's weakness. The older lion rose to his feet with great effort, growling in warning, but the younger lion simply laughed, a low, menacing sound that echoed across the plains. He had no respect for the old lion. To him, the lion was a relic, a creature past its prime. The gazelle, standing nearby, saw the danger before the lion did. Her heart raced as she realized what was about to happen. She had seen the lion fight many times before, but this time he was too weak. She felt helpless, but something inside her stirred, a fierce desire to protect the lion who had become her friend, her guardian. Without thinking, the gazelle darted forward, positioning herself between the rival lion and the older lion. The young lion paused, confused by the gazelle's sudden movement. The gazelle, small and fragile, could not hope to overpower him, but she could distract him long enough for the lion to regroup. The older lion watched in disbelief as the gazelle positioned herself, her body tense with determination. The younger lion sneered at her, but he hesitated, unwilling to harm her. It was a strange sight, predator and prey, standing together against a common threat. The older lion's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. The gazelle, who he had once viewed as prey, was now his ally, standing by him when it mattered most. The young lion, seeing the gazelle's bravery, growled low in frustration. He knew he could not fight both the lion and the gazelle. With a final, spiteful glance, he retreated into the grass, disappearing into the shadows. The older lion collapsed, his energy spent, but the gazelle stood beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of the bond they had formed. The lion's chest heaved with exhaustion, but he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had been saved, not by his strength, but by the trust and loyalty of the gazelle. As they stood together, the lion realized something he had never understood before. Survival in the wild was not just about strength, it was about trust, sacrifice, and the willingness to protect those who depended on you. The lion had spent his life fighting, but now he understood that sometimes the greatest strength came not from domination, but from the willingness to stand together, even when the odds were against you. The gazelle, too, had learned something important. She had always feared predators, had always run from them, but the lion had shown her that not all predators were the same. Survival was not just about fleeing from danger, it was about understanding, and sometimes about standing your ground. Together they had learned that even in the wild, where the law of nature dictated that predator and prey could never be allies, there was room for something more, a bond that transcended instincts and changed the very rules of the game. And so, with the lion's body weak but his heart strong, the lion and the gazelle continued to roam the savannah together. Their bond had been forged through struggle, trust, and mutual sacrifice. And in that, they had found not only survival, but something far greater. A friendship that would endure against the wild's greatest challenges. The savannah, with its endless horizon and golden plains, had witnessed many seasons. The lion had roamed these lands for many of them, a king of the wild, fierce and unchallenged. But as the days passed and his body grew weaker, the savannah began to feel different to him. The sun, though just as bright, seemed harsher on his aging frame. His once mighty limbs now trembled with the weight of age, his steps faltering as he moved through the vast stretches of land he had once ruled with ease. The gazelle, ever by his side, had learned to walk with him through these quieter moments. Their bond, forged in the heat of danger and tempered with mutual trust, had become a lifeline for both. The gazelle had once seen him only as a predator, a creature that embodied the harsh rules of the wild. But now she saw him as a protector, a companion, someone whose strength, though fading, was still enough to shield her from the world's cruelty. And yet, even the lion's strength had limits. One evening, as the orange and pink hues of sunset began to cast a warm glow across the plains, the lion lay beneath a large tree, his chest rising and falling with labored breath. His once grand mane now hung in tattered strands, and his body, weakened by time and battle, seemed frail in comparison to the mighty beast he had once been. The gazelle stood a few paces away, her fawn grazing beside her, watching the lion with a look of deep concern. The lion's once commanding roar had become little more than a soft growl, a whisper of the king he had been. The deep wounds from past skirmishes with other predators, some of which he had won, some he had lost, had taken their toll. Each scar, each injury, had weakened him further. And now, despite his best efforts, his body was no longer able to carry the weight of his past. The gazelle approached slowly, her hooves making no sound as she stepped closer to the lion. She had seen the signs before. The way his strength had faltered, how his movements had become slower, the way his once vibrant eyes now seemed dull and tired. As she reached him, she lowered her head and nuzzled his side, just as she had done so many times before. The lion opened his eyes and met her gaze, his body trembling with the effort of simply lifting his head. There was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet resignation. "I've protected you as best I could." The lion's voice was low, barely a whisper. "But my time has come." The gazelle's heart ached. She had never imagined that this day would come. The day when the lion would no longer be able to stand by her side, when he would no longer be able to protect her. But she understood. The wild was unforgiving, and even the strongest could not withstand the weight of time forever. "You saved me," the gazelle whispered, her voice trembling. "You've given me more than I could ever repay." The lion closed his eyes, his breath shallow, as if savoring the moment. His body was worn, but his heart was at peace. He had found something in the gazelle that he had never expected, a bond that transcended the rules of predator and prey. He had learned in his final years that there was more to life than the hunt. There was trust, there was protection, there was love in its own quiet way. And then, with a final, soft sigh, the lion's body relaxed. His heart slowed and his breath ceased. The gazelle stood silently by his side, her eyes filled with tears. She had never known a creature like him. A lion, once the embodiment of strength and fear, had become her closest companion, and now she was alone. But even in his passing, the lion had left something behind. The gazelle, her heart heavy with sorrow, knew that the lion's sacrifice, his protection, and his love had changed her forever. The seasons changed, as they always did in the savannah. The days grew longer, the rains came and went, and the circle of life continued. The gazelle, though heartbroken by the loss of her protector, carried on. She continued to roam the plains, now wiser, more cautious, yet braver than before. In the days following the lion's death, she would often find herself at the same watering hole where they had first met. She would stand there, her eyes scanning the horizon, wondering if the lion's spirit lingered in the very air she breathed. He had been more than a protector to her. He had been a teacher, showing her that the wild was not just a place of predators and prey, but a place of connections, of bonds that transcended the natural order. The gazelle continued to lead her fawn through the savannah, teaching him the lessons the lion had imparted to her. Lessons of caution, of trust, and of survival. She would often find herself pausing to watch over him, just as the lion had once watched over her. And in those moments, she would feel his presence beside her, a comforting reminder of the lion who had changed her life forever. Over time, the other animals of the savannah came to respect the gazelle in a way they never had before. The lion's protection had made her something more than just prey. She was a survivor, a creature who had formed an unlikely friendship with one of the savannah's most feared predators. She carried the lion's legacy with her, a reminder that the savannah, for all its dangers, was also a place where bonds could be formed, where even the most unlikely of companions could find common ground. One evening, as the gazelle stood on a hill overlooking the vast expanse of the savannah, she thought back on the lion and all that they had shared. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land, and the wind whispered softly through the tall grasses. It was a peaceful moment, and yet her heart ached as she thought of the lion, now gone from the world. But in that moment of reflection, she understood something that had eluded her for so long. The roles we play in the wild, the roles of predator and prey, of hunter and hunted, are not set in stone. Life in the savannah is not defined by the nature of the creatures, but by the connections we make with one another. The lion had taught her that, and now she would carry that lesson with her for the rest of her life. The gazelle turned, her fawn grazing quietly beside her, and she moved forward into the vast savannah. The journey would continue, as it always had, but now it was different. The savannah was no longer a place where she was simply a prey animal, a creature at the mercy of nature's law. She was a survivor, a creature who had formed a bond that defied the rules of nature itself. As the gazelle walked into the fading light, she carried the lion's legacy within her, a legacy of trust, of sacrifice, and of the unexpected bonds that can form, even in the face of nature's laws.